This presentation is about variation in idioms dictionaries, more specifically lexicographer's work in the post-editing era. Here is the overview. In the introduction, I'll give a brief overview of corpus investigations of idiom variation. Then I'll move on to post-editing work in idioms dictionaries, and I'll be using entries in the online dictionary of Croatian idioms as illustrative examples. This will be followed by a discussion and examples of entries in this dictionary. The final section is the conclusion. Idioms present a major challenge in dictionary making. In the digital era, the focus is mainly on automatic identification and extraction of idiomatic expressions. On the other hand, one of the key issues facing lexicographers who compile dictionaries of idioms is variation. Studies conducted in large corpora show that idioms have two or more forms which have become conventionalized through frequent use. And now I'll give some examples of conventionalized variations from the Croatian web corpus Hrvak. Some idioms have variations, one of which is a verb phrase and the other a noun phrase. For instance, a fight against windmills and fight windmills. Some variations are stative and dynamic constructions. For example, be in a trap and fall into a trap. And other variations are directional opposites. For instance, get the hang of something and lose the hang of something. In addition to having conventionalized variations, idioms are often creatively exploited in discourse. So speakers change or add words, reverse the order of words, etc. Such deliberate ad hoc manipulations, that I will term modifications, are created for communicative purposes. Here is an example of a modification from the Hrvak corpus. The idiom is napraviti od muhe slona, which literally means to make an elephant out of a fly. The figurative meaning is to make a slight difficulty seem like a serious problem. In the following example, the word elephant has been replaced with another noun. The example reads, they're coming up with these bombshell headlines and really exaggerating. Literally, they're making an ox out of a fly. Cognitive linguistic studies of idiom modifications show that they display some regularity. So to go back to the previous example, make an elephant out of a fly, data from Hrvak shows that speakers often use other words instead of elephant, which denote big animals or objects. So speakers say things like make an ox, camel, plane, and Kilimanjaro out of a fly. When it comes to dealing with idiom variation in lexicography, lexicographers compiling idioms dictionaries use corpora to identify idioms, all their variations, and creative use, i.e. modifications. Dictionaries based on corpus data show users that idioms have two or more forms and that speakers play with idioms. And this is what I will be focusing on in the remainder of this presentation. So the aim is to highlight three practical issues of post-editing work involved in the lexicographic treatment of variations and modifications. And these are the following. Finding all the conventionalized forms of an idiom in a corpus and identifying the commonest one. 2, distinguishing variations from modifications, and 3, finding the most common patterns of modification for individual expressions. I'll be using entries in the online dictionary of Croatian idioms as examples. This is a corpus-driven dictionary. We use the Croatian web corpus Hrvak, which is available in the sketch engine. And idioms are identified using word sketches and collocations of 500 most frequent verbs, nouns, and adjectives. When it comes to post-editing work, we use 3 main types of queries in the sketch engine to identify variations and modifications, namely collocations, filter, and CQL. As verb variation is the commonest type, queries are conducted using other word classes and/or constructions. So now let's talk about the 3 tasks involved in post-editing work. The first task is finding all the conventionalized forms of an idiom. In order to do that, we use collocations and filter, and we search the corpus within a window of 5 words. In some cases, we search for one specific word, for example, škripac, corner, which occurs in the idiom be in a corner. In other cases, we search for two lexical items, for example, knife and back, to find all the variations of the idiom stab someone in the back. And we also search for constructions, for example, a pre-modifier and a noun such as raširenih ruku with open arms. And now I'll show three specific examples of corpus queries. The first example is the lemma škripac corner. So we searched for its collocates within a span of 5 words. We found that the stative construction be in a corner, be in a difficult situation, is the most frequent form. But there are other dynamic constructions which all describe getting into a difficult situation or putting someone into a difficult situation. And these are find yourself in a corner, get into a corner, back and force somebody into a corner. We also found a form which describes getting out of a difficult situation, and that is get out of a corner. The next example is the filter query. So we searched for the nouns knife and back within a span of 5 words. And we found that this idiom has 2 conventionalized variations. One is a verb phrase, that is to stab someone in the back with over 1,000 tokens. And the other is a noun phrase, nožuleđa, a stab in the back with 26 tokens. The third example is the construction raširenih ruku, literally with open arms. So we searched for its collocates within a span of 5 words. This idiom has 3 conventionalized forms. The most frequent verb is greet. So there are 427 examples of this construction, to greet someone with open arms. And there are 2 less frequent forms, which with verbs take in and accept respectively. So this was the first task, and now we come to the task of distinguishing variations from modifications. In the online dictionary of creation idioms for creative use, the cutoff threshold has been set at 5 in line with Evert. So Evert has shown that word combinations which occur in a corpus 5 or more times are not random occurrences. Therefore, constructions which occur fewer than 5 times in the Hrvat corpus are treated as modifications. Here is an example. The idiom is fali daska u glavi komu, literally be missing one plank in your head, and the figurative meaning is crazy. So we use the filter query. We searched for miss and plank within a span of 5 words. So corpus data shows that quantifiers are often inserted before the noun plank, and some of these are modifications, and we know this because we see their frequencies. The examples are be missing a couple of planks in your head and be missing a set of planks in your head. And the third task is finding the most common patterns of modification. So if corpus data shows that speakers often replace or add words in an idiom, specific queries are conducted to identify patterns of modification. Here is an example. The idiom is literally 2 or 3 spears above, so it means a cut above. Now, speakers often use other numerals instead of 2 and 3 in order to show how much better someone or something is. And in order to find words that are used instead of 2 and 3, we conducted a CQL query. So corpus data shows that when this idiom is used creatively, speakers insert different numerals. So literally speaking, you can be 6, 7, 9, 33, etc. spears above someone. So this modification is regular in that, well, basically any other numeral can be inserted here. To summarize, in order to identify all the variations of an idiom in a corpus, fairly general queries need to be conducted. Post-editing work in the online dictionary of creation idioms shows that searches are successful when the query consists of a highly salient idiomatic constituent or the co-occurrence of core lexical constituents relatively close together. An example of a highly salient idiomatic component is škripac, corner, which enabled us to find all the variations of this idiom, including be in a corner, get into a corner, and get out of a corner. And when it comes to the co-occurrence of core lexical constituents, by searching for knife and back, fairly close together, we found 2 conventionalized variations of this idiom, stab someone in the back and a stab in the back. If an idiom is prone to creative use, more precisely framed queries are needed in order to determine patterns of modification. One such query is corpus query language, or CQL. Overall, when it comes to idioms which display flexibility, the organization of dictionary entries fundamentally depends on the lexicographer's theoretical approach to idiomaticity in general and variation in particular. So in the online dictionary of creation idioms, items with common lexis which have different grammatical forms are treated as variations and are listed in a single entry. This is in line with the cognitive linguistic view that variations present the same event in different ways. Modifications are included in this dictionary because they are constrained by an idiom's meaning and the meanings of the individual components. In addition, modifications display some regularity, and this is the example of the idiom which means X cuts above, where a number of numerals can be inserted. Now I'm going to show some examples of entries in the online dictionary of creation idioms. In this dictionary, the headword is the most frequent form of an idiom. Less frequent conventionalized forms are shown underneath the headword or after the main entry. Special boxes at the end of some entries show what types of changes are typically made to an idiom when it is used creatively. Here is the entry for greet someone with open arms. So the headword is the most frequent form, and less frequent variations are shown underneath the headword. This is the entry for stab someone in the back. So the headword is the most frequent form again, and the variation, the noun phrase stab in the back, being much less frequent than the verb phrase form, is shown after the main entry. And this is the entry for a cut above. So this entry contains a special box with modifications at the end. And the explanation reads, speakers often replace 2 and 3 with other words to show how much better someone is. So to conclude, even though content is created automatically in the digital era, post-editing work in idioms dictionaries requires a linguistic background and advanced knowledge of designing corpus queries so as to find variations and modifications. Ultimately, this means creating dictionary entries which show users that idioms are dynamic vocabulary items. Here are the references. Thank you very much.